Allah, know God, and know ourselves, we don't know one another. Look, when I see you, I know who I'm looking at. There's not one of you in this place that I don't love. I may never have met you before, but when I see you, I know who I'm looking at. And I know that I have a duty by you. And you will never find me disrespecting any of you because I know who you are. It makes no difference how young or how old. You are from Allah. Listen now. And therefore, the essence of you is Him. I'm going to say that again. You are from Allah. Therefore, the essence of you is Him. So you are not only able to become a human being, but if you evolve properly, you can become an expression of, a manifestation of the divine characteristics of God Himself. Listen. So the Bible says, how can you love God whom you have never seen and hate your brother whom you see every day? Let's not just say it, let's understand it more. Listen, how can you love God whom you've never seen and hate your brother whom you see every day? Now the principal words in this is God and brother. And you have love and hate. Two opposites. But God and brother are not opposite. God and brother are similar, but you love one that you've never seen and hate the other whom you see every day. Well, now what Allah is saying to us is when you hate your brother, in whom is the essence of God, you are hating God. So the question is asked, how can you love God whom you've never seen and hate your brother in whom God is? And you see him every day. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, every time I see a black man, I'm looking at God.
You are now tuned in to the Respect for Life radio broadcast with your host, Brother Keith Muhammad. This program is dedicated to the unity and upliftment of the Black community. Our goal is to change the world, one mind at a time.
Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome again to the Respect for Life radio broadcast. I'm your host, Brother Keith Muhammad, here with my good brother, founder, CEO, and visionary of CMPRadio.net, Brother John Pierre. Assalamu alaikum, good brother.
Wa alaikum salam. How you feeling, good brother?
I'm good. Praise be to Allah. Thankful and grateful once again to be able to come to the listeners of this great station via this platform. Thankful for the opportunity to share our thoughts and really dialogue and discuss not only current events, but current realities that we live under here in this present world. Our mantra at the Respect for Life broadcast is whoever controls the diameter of your thinking, or pardon me, whoever prescribes the diameter of your thinking controls the circumference of your activities. And as we have stated in recent broadcasts, the activities going on in America and all over the planet right now have many reeling, have many questioning, have many upset, angry. And this is all the byproduct of a mindset that has been ruling over the people for far too long. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan teach us that dissatisfaction brings about a change. And when you have a certain level of dissatisfaction, it's going to bring about a complete change. And you'll be hard pressed to find too many people on this planet that are satisfied with the current realities of this world. So we want to prepare our minds to break free from the ceiling of thought that limits us to this world's ideals, this world's thought pattern that really have us dissatisfied. If dissatisfaction brings about a change, if we're dissatisfied, then we should be actively doing that which will change what we are dissatisfied about. And that's what you see protesting. That's what you see people up in arms about today. But unfortunately, oftentimes when we seek change and we try to implement change, we're using the same paradigm that produced the dissatisfaction to try to bring about the change. So we are thankful to be with you this week. And we want to discuss many things today, but our subject today is one that is certainly quite controversial amongst many, certainly Black people. But we want to raise the question, should Black people consider separation? And, you know, this topic is one that is discussed and is really a topic that should be discussed. And we raise the question, should Black people consider separation? But the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who commissioned our dear sister, Sister Ava Muhammad, who's a brilliant attorney and a national spokesperson for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, to do a nationwide tour. And we were in Philadelphia last year, almost around this time. And she's been holding town hall meetings with this question, should we consider separation? But in recent months, the minister said that it really should be changed, that we must consider separation. So we want to broach that subject tonight. But also we want to just cover a few, as we like to do, the current events and the Final Call news segment. And there's so much going on in the news. Of course, the uprising, the protests, and now the recent killing of our brother in Atlanta by the police, several hangings that have taken place, mainly on the West Coast. So it doesn't seem as though the unrest is going to stop.
No, it's not. It's not.
And it reminds me of the last time Minister Farrakhan spoke to us coming out of Ramadan, on the last day of Ramadan, really the day of the Eid. He said things will never go back to the way they were. So what was normal is not going to happen again. So we have to get ready for the new normal. And that's why we need to break free from the thought, the limited thinking that many of us may have that makes us really unable to adapt to change. So one thing I know, the brothers, I wasn't able to make it. I wanted to bring up that I watched and listened Saturday. I believe it was Saturday. The brothers in Chester had a march and a rally. And if you could just share, because I know you were a part of it, and I listened attentively, and I listened to a very good program this morning with Brother Corey, Coach Bell, and a couple other coaches. That was very inspirational, if you ask me, along with the brothers coming together. So I don't know if you were part of the planning for the march, but if you could share what that was about. And we also had something that you are involved in working on with the Chestorian Project. But I did want you to comment on the march and on the activities that
So
took place over the weekend. Yes, sir.
so the march was organized by Coach Bell, I believe, his coaching staff and various community members, right? The mayor. It's funny because Miss Cogdell, when she said, black people separate anyway, often against each other. We talked about that before this, right? The
Mm-hmm.
separation. But I think Coach Bell had a very beautiful idea to bring all the brothers together, because in a sense we are separated. We belong to different groups. We belong to, your FOI, there are different sects of Muslims. We have Christians. We had the frat brothers there. We had jokers that turned their life around. We had jokers that might still be playing around. You know what I mean? So it was a very wide variety of brothers down there, and it was a very good moment. It was time for us to come together, have conversations. At the end, they Coach Charles and I can't remember the minister's name, but they spoke about the beef and the problem that they had and how they were moving
Right.
past that, willing to forgive each other and move forward. So I think it was very important. It was very uplifting, right, to see the brothers march, come together, talk about the things that need to happen in the community, because until we
Right.
do these things that are necessary, nothing's going to change, and we're going to continue to have the same problems over and over and over again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that was, as I said, I watched, I listened, and I remember that moment where the brother said he may not even been aware that he had an issue, but that mindset, and it often starts, and it reminds me of when we were preparing for, of course, the Million Man March, but each year on the anniversary of the Million Man March, we have the Holy Day of Atonement, and it's all about reconciliation and ending discord between brothers and family and sisters. And that's absolutely vital in order for us to make the kind of change we desire to make in our community. Because how can we go to the young brothers and sisters who are warring and beefing and killing one another over senseless things, yet we as adults, whether it's Christian and Muslim, religious beefing, religious gangbang, political gang banging, however we do it, we still, as Sister said, we're divided along many accords. But the reality is, it's due to our immaturity and lacking understanding on many levels because we don't see things exactly the same. Doesn't mean we can't work together and be cordial, be respectful, be brotherly and sisterly toward one another. Because I agree with you on everything, doesn't mean that we have to be at odds on everything when it comes to what we want to see accomplished in our community. See, the real issue is not, in some cases, but that we have different aims and goals. It's that we have different approaches. And because we're immature, we think that makes us to be at odds with each other. I'll give you a good example. Minister Farrakhan always talks about before you gain the understanding of math or even arithmetic, children who learn from their parents, they may be taught that 3 and 4 is 7, another child 5 and 2 is 7, another child 6 and 1 is 7, and they get together and start arguing. Well, my mother said 3 and 4 is 7. My father said 5 and 2 is 7. Your father dumb. My mother said 6 and 1 is 7. All of them are right.
Right, all of them.
All of them are right, getting to the right answer, but they're taking different approaches. And oftentimes, because we get so caught up in the approach, we lose focus of the goal. If the goal is peace, if the goal is ending the violence, if the goal is having a safe and decent community, why argue over the approach, even though we may need to discuss the approach based on what we're trying to achieve? But if the overall goal is the same, why be at odds with each other? As I shared this story before, when I first started working in Chester, in an attempt to go amongst my brethren from various communities, I sat and saw a group of brothers and sisters who were hitting the streets every night or every week at least to help stop violence. And they called themselves the Christian Coalition. So I said, I want to join the Christian Coalition. And that caused a little stir amongst just a couple. Some were very open to it, but certain individuals had a problem with it.
Right.
Those are the kind of things that keep us from making the kind of progress. So seeing the brothers out, seeing and listening, and I'd never met, I think I met him, but I never heard Coach Bell before this morning really speak. He sounds like a preacher.
And he's a deacon.
Me.
He's a deacon
He's a deacon.
be
Okay.
honest. And we had a conversation because not too long after the march, I got a phone call from a couple of Muslim brothers and
right.
And I say the things that divide us so much, man, are typically the things that should bring us together. And we'll find the easiest point to disagree. You know what I mean? What's the first thing? And it's like some things you have to get over because you know how I am with religion. I believe that's a personal journey, right? So it shouldn't be something on the table to be dissected by 1,000 people. Whether you are hullabaloo, we're all underneath of this brown color that we have, this hue that our skin is a part of, and we're oppressed. I don't know too many brown people that can agree that they aren't oppressed and that their community isn't falling apart and they're suffering from a lack of resources and their educational system isn't falling apart. So for me, it can't be a constant back and forth of what sect we belong to or who we're praying to if we're all suffering. If at the end of the day you come out of your house of worship and there's a young man on the street being kneeled on until he's dead, then there's a problem. Right. And I said it the other day, and I think they got mad at me. I'm tired of the poverty pimps. I'm tired of the brothers that might have been doing it for 15, 20 years talking about I don't want to hear the eyes anymore. I don't. I want to hear I want to see what you're doing. I want to see results because that's what we're trying to do right now. Get the results. So we can work together to do that though. Right. Let me assist you on the things that you might be falling short on and assist me on the things that I'm falling short on. I think that's what we have to do as Black people. So when Coach Bell spoke today, he considers himself to be an outsider. I don't. Right. I consider him to be, from Chester. His wife and I went to high school together, class of 97. That's my president. But he spoke about what he found in Chester. What he heard about Chester, and then what he said, I found my pride in Chester. There is so much to be happy about. There is so much to praise. There is so much to exalt. There is so much to improve in this city of Chester. So to hear him speak, and I called him afterwards and I said, thank you, right? Because we're having the wrong conversations. And people are having the wrong conversations, and people that are involved with this are having the wrong conversations. And I'm tired of the personal stuff. Me. And if I hear another person talk about the things that they do, I don't want to talk to you at all.
Yes, sir. And we spoke about this a little while back in general in the work we're trying to do. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said it like this. He was told by his teacher in the work that he was attempting to do, he had the hardest job of any man that ever lived, which is trying to raise the Black man and woman of America up because of our mental condition. We suffer from mental death, and that death is that we don't have and can't really see our self-interest and operate in our own best interests because of a mindset of mental death that has us steeped in self-hatred, division, and we've been so trained and conditioned. And I know people like to argue whether the Willie Lynch letter is real or not, but what it speaks to is absolutely real. And the divisiveness and how we've been socially engineered as a people. And that's why we find ourselves at every opportunity looking to highlight our differences rather than working together. And religion is one of the biggest, most divisive areas because we get offended by somebody else's profession of faith. It's fine. If you believe different than me, I expect you to be convicted in your faith. And because you exalt Jesus' name, though I may have a different understanding or perspective, it's not insulting to me. Just like if I raise the name Allah and I speak of that which I believe, it shouldn't be offensive to you. We're not here debating, discussing religion. We're here trying to save our people. And if we're all claiming one God, and you have all these prophets and scriptures, as much as we want to minimize and dispute whether one is real and the other is not, obviously somebody came and impacted the world, and you have all these prophets that everybody's claiming. But in the name of these prophets and one God, we're claiming we're all divided, arguing, and fighting amongst ourselves. That's certainly not the work of God. He's not the author of confusion. But anyway, it's important for us to really continue on the line. And as we said, we had spoke about it, and those of like mind, those of the willing, we have to keep pushing forward and continue to make progress and work to change the condition under which our people live in the city of Chester, make it a safe and decent place for our babies to grow up in, that they don't have the danger lurking around every corner that they have now. And it's really the men that have dropped the ball. And it's on us, along with our sisters, to do what needs to be done. So
But
I
after
was
so many
encouraged.
years of dropping the ball, right, we have to be allowed to pick the ball back up. I can't be fussed at about how I dropped the ball, and
Got it now.
I got let me pick it. Let me help you. And I think that's what this group that we're starting, the Chestorians, is about, right? It's about bringing accountability back in all factions of our community, right? And we're not trying to reinvent the wheel for the people that are already doing things. We just want to help out, right? I've been saying this for the past. You've been listening to me say this for the past year and a half, right?
Mhm.
How do we put brothers together to help out, right? Help out other organizations. I've been looking for people to help me organize this because, again, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, and I don't want to knock anybody off anything that they've already been doing. But I do want accountability, and I want people to be transparent about the things that they're doing. Right? I don't want to see a bunch of poverty pimps running around. Right? I don't want to see a bunch of people in nice cars and the kids are still hungry. The kids are still unsafe. Right? So don't make a dollar if the kids are still suffering. We 30, 40, 50 years into this situation, and we're not changing it. And I can't sit here and say I'm okay with that. And I won't continue to sit here and say I'm okay with that. So if I'm in it, I'm in it, and I want to help out, and I want to do what's necessary to be done. And I think we as a community have to do that. And the people have to see it because they want to see accountability. They want to see transparency. And until they see that, they're not going to move in the right direction.
Well, and as just so that we can move on, it's just important that yourself and all of like minds and all that are striving. The Bible says it like this: don't tire or get weary in doing good. And in a world like this, you can tire and get weary, especially working with our people. And understanding our condition is very important because when you understand the depths of the psychosis, it gives you longer patience, even though as we mature and grow and we say we are about something, then at some point we got to show it and not just talk about it. But so it was encouraging. I look forward to the continuation of the work that is being done and the spirit and energy that I felt over the weekend. Now, going to our subject, I want to read on the back page of the Final Call newspaper that you can get now digitally at finalcall.com, and what the brothers traditionally have been on the corner with selling, going all the way back to the Muhammad Speaks, which was the paper prior to 1975. And on the back page of each of those papers, they had what we like to call the Muslim program, and it consists of what the Muslims want and what the Muslims believe. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad put this together because certainly coming along in the early years, people were wondering, well, what are y'all all about? And still today, in particular, the Nation of Islam. And I want to read the first 4 points of what the Muslims want as the foundation of the rest of our discussion this evening. So on that, what the Muslims want, the Muslims program, point number 1, and I don't think we get any disagreement for any of our people, and really anybody, on the first 3 points of what we want. Point number 1, we want freedom. We want a full and complete freedom. Point number 2, we want justice. We want equal justice under the law. We want justice applied equally to all, regardless of creed or class or color. And point number 3, we want equal opportunity. We want equal membership in society with the best of civilized society. I don't think anybody in their right mind would argue against those wants, because that's a natural human desire for freedom, justice, and equality. And much of what we see, not much, all of what we see in the unrest and the protests is because we don't have freedom, justice, and equality in America as Black people. And we certainly know the justice system is criminal as it pertains to Black people. And equality of opportunity is not there. And really, if we understand it, true freedom is not there. We have license, we don't have freedom. When you understand how we operate and live in this nation. So those are the first 3 demands, the first 3 wants of the Nation of Islam. Now, point number 4 is what we want to focus on tonight, but you can't focus on point number 4 without the first 3. Point number 4 says we want our people in America whose parents or grandparents were descendants from slaves to be allowed to establish a separate state or territory of our own, either on this continent or elsewhere. We believe that our former slave masters are obligated to maintain and supply our needs in this separate territory or state for the next 20 to 25 years until we're able to produce and supply our own needs. Since we cannot get along with them in peace and equality, after giving them 400 years of our sweat, blood, and receiving in return some of the worst treatment human beings have ever experienced, we believe our contributions to this land and the suffering forced upon us by white America justifies our demand for complete separation in a state or territory of our own. That's point number 4 of what the Muslims want. And people may look at it and feel like that's extreme, that's crazy, they never gonna do it, whatever. But the rationale, you really can't argue with if you listen to the words of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. After 400 years of everything that we've given, and now over 100 years up from slavery, 50, 60 years from Jim Crow, when we're supposed to be now equal and having equal opportunity, but we're still fighting, just saying my life matters. Not saying it, I mean, that's a bare bone minimum. I seen a comedian, I don't know if it was Dave Chappelle or somebody else. I mean, it's not even, I think it was somebody else, but we're just saying I matter. I mean, you got to argue and fight because you state that your life matters. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad put this before the world. Minister Farrakhan continues to put it before the world. And it's a question that of course, will have varying opinions because of the controversy around it. But that's the position of the Nation of Islam. That's the position that we still have on our back page because we just don't believe, and history's on our side, that America will ever do right by her former slaves. Um, we don't believe there's a will amongst those in power in particular to make right the great wrong that America is rooted in. When you understand, and I mentioned this the other day, I think with Brother Corey, and we were on with Rabbi Jeremy in a discussion, and it's been a meme on Facebook. America, or racism, is so ingrained in America. When you criticize racism, they think you criticizing America. And the reality is that the essence and foundation of this nation is white supremacy. And because it is, to uproot it is to change the very foundation of it. And that's why you see the upheaval. That's why you see the anger from certain, and it's not just a few, millions upon millions of whites feel offended when you see uprising and protests from Black people just asking for justice, asking for equal opportunity and freedom under the flag that they salute and love so much. And we've seen it in recent headlines with Drew Brees and, of course, President Trump and Colin Kaepernick and the kneeling during the national anthem that caused and still continues to cause so much controversy, even after explaining it's not about the flag, even though, we will protest and talk about bringing down the rebel flag. But everything we suffered under the rebel flag, we suffered also under the American flag. So the feelings and the experience is not the same. So after suffering all this, after going through what we've gone through and still fighting in 2020 for justice, still having to argue and fight for the right to be treated humanely and just in this society, it sounds reasonable to me to even ask the question. And I want to raise a few more quotes before we may entertain some comments from those who may be in the comment section. But listen to this quote from one of the founding fathers of this nation, Thomas Jefferson, because as emotionally tied as we may be to the American experience, it's almost like Stockholm. It's not almost like, it's like Stockholm syndrome. It is that we get so attached to that which has been so destructive of us collectively as a people. And I know people will point out the opportunity that's here in America. People will put out the standard of living. And certainly, in many ways, America has afforded to its citizens a certain class and level of living that many people around the world don't have. But the question is, will we ever be free, justified, and equal? And will we ever be able to find peace under this system of things? But let's listen to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson stated in 1782, he writes in Notes on the State of Virginia, deep-rooted prejudices entertained by whites, 10,000 recollections, and today is millions, by Blacks of the injuries they have sustained, new provocations, the real distinctions which nature has made, and many other circumstances will divide us into parties and produce convulsions which will probably never end, but in the extermination of one or the other race. So Thomas Jefferson, in talking about the state of America, because, and you can say, well, that was a long time ago, and people will use that excuse. But when you deal with the foundation or the nature of a thing. When you deal with the essence of a thing, when something is the essence of a thing, it's the essential part that cannot be done without. The essence of America is white supremacy. The essence of America is manifest destiny. They feel they are justified and have a God-given right. I even seen a tweet today that someone, I think Jamil Hill, shared it on Twitter, but it was a white pastor wanting to change the language of white privilege, because white privilege, was too harsh in his mindset. And he talked about the curse of slavery, and he said that he sees it, and they should change the language and call it white blessings, because they're blessed by the curse of slavery. And because white privilege may be a little offensive to their ears, they want to change the narrative, change the language from white privilege to white blessing. But this is the thing that we have to understand, that Thomas Jefferson, knowing what his nation was founded on, knowing the condition of the two people, he says, because of the deep-rooted prejudices entertained by whites. See, the attitude of white supremacy is ingrained in the fiber and fabric of this world. I don't care how many good intended individuals we have, the undergirding foundation of this nation is rooted in white supremacy. And because of that prevailing attitude amongst the people, and because of the recollections of Black people, he says 10,000 recollections, but we know there are millions and millions of recollections, even in modern history, that these recollections by Blacks of the injuries they have sustained, plus new provocations, and the real distinction which nature has made. See, he's dealing with the two people not being exactly the same. And we just talked about highlighting differences amongst ourselves. But anyway, Thomas Jefferson saying, look, the only way this is going to end, he says, is by the extermination of one race or the other. Right now, people are questioning whether President Trump and other agent provocateurs are trying to start a race war. And that is something that's on the mind of many, as they call them the far right. But the reality is, Thomas Jefferson is saying, look, this thing can only end one way. Somebody got to go. And I know the great experiment called America, we still have hope in it. So many of us. Yes, Sister Jackie, you were at the meeting in Triumph Church. And as I stated earlier, I know you haven't heard anything. And the process is they're still trying to put together. I mean, they're seriously working on a legal presentation, compiling all the signatures. I haven't reached out. I think you were the one that reached out on our page. I haven't been able, and I haven't reached out to Sister Ava, but I will do so to see exactly where it is. I know a halt was put to it in Detroit. That was our last town hall in February. We were in Detroit, and because of the coronavirus, of course, things shut down. So we were still compiling, still going out. And because it's a small group working on it and it's centralized with them on the local level here, we're just waiting for further instructions. But I will do that, sister, and reach out for you to see where the next steps will be for that serious petition that we're putting together for separation. But Thomas Jefferson, knowing the circumstances, look at what he says. Thomas Jefferson says, now he says Blacks should be colonized. Now we disagree with that, but he was looking at the reality of things. He wrote, they should be colonized to such place as the circumstances of the time should render most proper, sending them out with arms. This is what the president said. He wants to send us out with weapons. We'll send them out with arms and implements of household and of the handcraft arts, seeds, pairs of useful domestic animals, to declare them free and independent people and extend to them our alliance and protection till they shall have acquired strength. See, he was reasonable in his consideration. Now, these are the founding fathers looking at the conditions that they know. And Thomas Jefferson went on further to say that he trembled for his nation because he considers and knows that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. So Thomas Jefferson was a reasonable man. He was a man that could see the conditions, knowing that you can't have this condition prevail for too long and people be okay with it. Now, they've been very sophisticated in pacifying us, but you see things rising up now. And the reality is separation is not a new theory. Separation is not man's theory. That's God's program. God says, come out of her. God has always separated the people who were oppressed from the oppressor. So that's the reasonable thoughts of Thomas Jefferson. And the Nation of Islam has stated, and we're still stating, we want 8 to 10 states. And some may say, well, that's crazy. That's illogical. But don't say it can't be done. And we certainly don't want the unjust treatment that we see took place with the uprooting and the seizing of the land of the Palestinians. But you have a model. Israel is a nation today because the United Nations and the governments of this world came together and decided to give them a homeland. Well, the basis of their homeland was that they felt, being the children of Israel, as they claimed, and not being being out of their homeland for so many thousands of years, they had a right to return. Well, the example or the type or the prophecy of the children of Israel, the 400 years of sojourn in Egypt, slavery, suffering, and death. Black people in America, we fulfill that. We fit that description. We've gone through that treatment. We were taken from our homeland. Most of us can't even find out where we from, what part of Africa. And then we go through these DNA tests trying to find out where we are. Pardon me. So there's a model for what took place to establish a state. There's a model. America, a wicked model, but they relocated their people and took over the land. We're not saying, because we believe our blood, sweat, and tears have earned us a place in this land. And we're not saying we got to force all people out, but this is something I think we as a people should consider if we're rational. And the last thing I want to quote is from good old Abe Lincoln, who was the president that Trump said he's done more than any president in history for Black people, excluding maybe Abraham Lincoln. But look at his address in 1862. And of course, we know he's the president that signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He and the government at that time went to war with the rebel South, if you will, as they desired to succeed from this nation. But we should know, and we're not going over all the history, that was not just about, and it really wasn't about the moral indignation and the moral thoughts of the North to want to end slavery. It was all about politics and economics. But here's his words in 1862. He talks about, he says, we have between us a broader difference than exists between almost any other two races. And this is him addressing Black pastors. He says, your race suffers very greatly, many of them by living among us, while ours suffer from your presence. So Abraham Lincoln, he said a lot more, but he says, we suffer from your presence, and certainly you suffer from being amongst us greatly. And there are great distinctions that remain between the two. And even though in the eyes of many and some that are being brought up today are not the same as their fathers and forefathers in many ways, as I said earlier, the ruling powers of this world are of a mindset that they would never share power with their former slave master and their children. And many of them will contend that it wasn't us, it wasn't our people, it was, we didn't put nobody in bondage. And that's true, but you're the beneficiaries. You're the inheritors of the privilege. You're the inheritors of 310 years of free labor, chattel slavery, where, if I can take 10 people who work a job and I can collect their check for 1 year, I would be set up pretty good. They do all the work, I collect a check. That's the foundation of this world. They took the labor and became rich and powerful. And many of the great corporations that exist today have their foundation and root in the free labor of our forefathers. But very few want to even talk about reparations. Very few want to even talk about making right the wrong that happened to our people. But the reality is this nation will never know peace. And really the world will never know peace until the problem of our people is solved. And we believe that it will be solved one way or another. And you have an opportunity to do right. So that's our program. That's our position. Many people feel like, well, as Sister Nicole mentioned and Brother Pierre earlier on, we can't even get along with each other in our community because we really are separated. And what does separation look like? And whether they give us or consider the case for separation or not, we are already divided and separate from most of the broader community. We live amongst each other, but we're not separate with an independent mindset. We're more like Thomas Jefferson said, we're colonized. Our affairs are ruled over by others outside of our community. So it's important that we take an independent mindset, whether it's in a state or territory of our own or right where we live in our city, where we take control of the economy in our community. We take control of the securing and policing of our community. We take control of the affairs and education in our community. See, that's the mindset of a free and independent thinking people. And that's why our mantra here at the Respect for Life program is whoever prescribes the diameter of your thinking, whoever programs our thought is going to control our actions. And whether we have a separate territory of own or not, look at the other community. They control the economy, they control the education, they control the politics where they live. We are the only people who don't do that because of what has happened to us mentally. We don't think independent and free. And that has to change if we're going to get any kind of change to take place amongst us as a people. So whether we're in a separate state or territory, being a sovereign nation, we have to think independent. Look at everywhere where you get immigrants coming into this country. They set up economies, they set up bases, they live amongst each other, then they take over the schooling in their area, they take over the business in their area. That's just wise. That's what people do. So you got Chinatown in Philadelphia. Even amongst our Latino brothers and sisters, when they come in the city, they congregate, they live in the same area. You down Fifth Street, the businesses are owned by them, even though there are others down there. But the reality is that's the natural course of things. But we're in an unnatural state as a people, so we got to start thinking differently. So the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Farrakhan raised the question, should we consider separation? No, we must consider it. We must right now begin to separate our minds from the mindset that has produced the condition we are dissatisfied with. We have to come together as we saw the brothers coming together this weekend. We got to come together as a city, a Chester. We got to come together as communities throughout America and have the mindset that we're going to set up and control the environment. Now, we got an uphill climb. We got the difficult problem of violence in our community. But I do believe that if we begin to do the things that are what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, take a free step toward independence, and we show that to our young people, most will be on board with it. Most will be willing to operate in another mindset if they can see. And we've mentioned this before. Much, if not all of the violence, but most of it is born out of hopelessness. Born and produced from an engineering, a social engineering that goes so deep that, as it was mentioned, I think the other day, you got, or this morning they were mentioning it, you got cousins fighting each other, shooting and killing one another in the city. See, how can I be my blood relative and be at war with them? See, that's a mindset and a disconnect. So families are destroyed. And family is the basis of community. And so there's a great repair work that has to go on. But I do believe that if we approach our problems not looking, and one of the discouraging things, and it's not surprising to me, but of all that we hear going on, and people say this is a different, and I agree, there's a different spirit and energy right now. But the solutions are all the same that they've always been. Petition, and I'm not saying we should not make demands on government, I'm not saying that. But if that's my only program, is to beg and petition the same system that is the problem, that's like asking the spider to stop spinning the web. We make the demand, but we got to start building and spinning our own web in our own community. We have to take control of the local politics, take control of the local economy, and take control of the education. And with all the madness in the education and politics in Chester, and we'll fight for not having this control and not having this and that. But the reality is the only reason it's in that condition is because of the inactivity, or really the lack of maturity, I'm gonna say it like that, of us as a community. Because where the Asians live, the Russians live, the Italians live, the Greeks live, when you go through various cities, because of the maturity, the Asians, the there's a certain level of maturity that they have. And I don't mean it in a childlike sense, being immature emotionally, even though we are, but the understanding of how to operate independently. And we need that, whether we just make Chester a black city. We got a lot of, most major cities, not most, but many of the major cities are predominantly black as far as the population and who lives there, but they're still controlled by white people. We're colonized in our little cities. Delaware County controls Chester.
Sad.
Yeah, it is sad, but it's only because of our immature. If we want to make Chester, and I think a brother called it Chester a mecca for black people. It can be that, but it ain't gonna be that using the same old mindset of do this for
change
us.
It. We got to change
We have to change it, and you see it, especially in the younger generation. And the thing is understanding and having a certain understanding of certain dynamics that if you're looking for the outside to change it, they're never going to change it to be what you want it to be. You know what I mean? They'll make it a better colony for you, give you a little better accommodations, but they still control. As we said to the rabbi on, was that Friday we were on, or Thursday? You know, the thing is, and Brother Corey brought it up, you know, he talked about spending so much time trying to explain and